welcome back to our channel. Top 5 rare US quarters that could make you rich. 3 is a total shocker. Like and subscribe now. In the hum of machinery at the Philadelphia Mint in 1981, thousands upon thousands of quarter-dollar coins flowed across gleaming metal surfaces, pressed and struck with mechanical precision. The design, George Washington's iconic profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, had been a familiar sight since 1932, a tribute originally commemorating the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. By 1981, this design had become a symbol of everyday commerce, a nearly invisible component of wallets and cash drawers across the nation. The quarters of that year, with their copper-nickel cladding and a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, were unremarkable to the average citizen. But within the repetition of minting, within the controlled chaos of high-speed production, a sliver of history deviated from the intended path. It happened quietly, with no alarms or alerts, just a momentary slip, a slight misalignment, a flawed die, a human oversight, or perhaps a piece of debris resting just where it shouldn't. Among the millions, one quarter emerged bearing subtle signs of difference, unnoticed amid its pristine peers. As weeks passed, the coin moved from one pair of hands to another, tossed into vending machines, returned as change, clinked into a child's piggy bank, forgotten at the bottom of a purse. And then, one day, it ended up on the velvet-lined table of a coin enthusiast named Martin Ellsworth. Martin wasn't the kind of collector who hoarded coins by the sackful. He was a quiet, solitary figure with a meticulous eye and a habit of combing through his spare change after weekly grocery runs. It was a ritual more than a hobby, a meditation on the passing of time through minted metal. The quarter came to him in a cash register's ordinary return, nestled beside a dull nickel and a bent penny. At first glance, it appeared no different than the rest. Worn around the edges, a bit dulled from circulation. But as he turned it in his fingers under the kitchen light, something caught his eye, a disturbance in the lettering of Liberty, a strange doubling near the date. He squinted, pulled out a magnifying glass, and steadied his hand. The 1981 seemed off, as if it had been struck twice, but only slightly. The 1 was bold, almost ghosted beside itself. The rim, too, showed signs of misalignment, a telltale clue that this was no mere wear and tear. His breath slowed. It was the kind of anomaly he'd read about in dusty coin journals, discussed in forums frequented by the obsessed and the hopeful. But to hold such a coin? That was something else entirely. In the days that followed, Martin's obsession grew. He consulted error coin databases, pored over reports from the American Numismatic Association, even reached out to a local appraiser. Each new opinion fed the suspense. This wasn't a simple double die, they told him. It might have been a misstrike, a hub doubling, possibly even a transitional planchet error. But none of them could agree completely. The combination of markers, the off-center lettering, the thickened date, the weak reverse strike, didn't match any catalogued example perfectly. Which, in the numismatic world, was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Back in 1981, the mint was under pressure. Inflation was rising, coin demand was fluctuating, and the push for speed often eclipsed the demand for perfection. Dies were reused longer than they should have been, planchets were loaded hastily, and sometimes quality checks couldn't catch everything. Errors occurred, but most were minor, and many went unnoticed. Some, however, managed to escape scrutiny, making their way into the public in such small numbers that decades could pass before anyone realized they existed. Martin's coin, as it turned out, was one of those rare fugitives. With the help of a microscope-equipped dealer in New Jersey, he confirmed what he had begun to suspect. The quarter bore the signs of a misplaced die clash, an imprint of the reverse design faintly visible on the obverse field. It also had a subtle shift in metal coloration around the rim, suggesting the coin had been struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination entirely, perhaps a Susan B. Anthony dollar or a foreign coin blank. The more experts weighed in, the more the mystery deepened. No two agreed on exactly what the error was, but all concurred on one thing: it was not supposed to exist. At first, the coin's value was modest. An initial offer of $5,000 came from a small-time collector, followed by another for $9,000 from a West Coast enthusiast. Martin declined both. He wasn't interested in flipping it, not yet. The coin's value, he sensed, was still unfolding. It wasn't just metal anymore, it was history, anomaly, and a puzzle rolled into one that the online coin community began to buzz. Discussions on forums became heated. Photos of the quarter circulated under code names and blurry images to protect Martin's anonymity. Some speculated it was a proof die accidentally used on a business strike blank. Others argued it was an off-metal strike, the result of leftover planchets from a discontinued coin. There was even a rumor, unverified but persistent, that a former Mint employee recalled a die mix-up during a late-night shift in early 1981 that was never officially recorded. Gradually, as more attention turned to the coin, offers grew. By the following year, a private buyer from Chicago offered $5,000. Martin wavered but again refused. Then came the twist. Another collector came forward claiming to have found a similar quarter in Idaho, but theirs bore only one of the unique markers. It lacked the reverse die clash but featured the same off-metal toning. This revelation rocked the small community of error coin hunters. Was it possible there were more? Had an entire batch been released? A numismatist from Boston began compiling data, comparing known 1981 quarters and their anomalies. She found subtle consistencies in coins minted during a specific window, March to April 1981 at the Philadelphia Mint. It suggested that the error wasn't entirely isolated, but part of a short-lived production mishap. Still, Martin's coin remained the most complete version, bearing all the suspected errors in a single specimen. As awareness spread, so did the appetite. Auction houses began reaching out. Offers climbed into 5 figures. At one point, a high-profile investor from Dubai offered $18,000, sparking rumors that the coin's worth might surge beyond $25,000 if sold at the right venue. Martin, now deep into the world of numismatics, began to understand something crucial: value wasn't static. It danced to the rhythm of discovery, rarity, and demand. And as more partial matches appeared, Martin's full-error quarter only grew in significance. It had become the prototype, the benchmark against which all others were judged. Then came the most unexpected twist of all. A retired Mint employee, responding to an article in a numismatic journal, contacted Martin through a third party. The man, who had worked briefly in the die maintenance division in 1981, shared a story. During one shift, a tray of Susan B. Anthony dollar planchets had been misrouted to the quarter-striking press. Most of the coins were caught and destroyed, but a few had been mistakenly struck and released. He remembered because the incident caused a week-long internal audit. No formal report was ever filed to avoid public embarrassment. The implications were staggering. If true, Martin's quarter wasn't just an error, it was a survivor of an internal Mint scandal, a remnant of a cover-up no one ever admitted publicly. Collectors reeled. Authentication agencies moved quickly to validate the story. Metallurgical analysis of Martin's coin revealed trace manganese content, consistent with planchets used in other coin denominations of the era. This further supported the employee's account. The quarter was, in all likelihood, struck on a planchet not meant for it, a minting error compounded by procedural failure and bureaucratic silence. When the coin finally went to auction 2 years after Martin first found it, the bidding war was fierce. Collectors from 3 continents participated. The coin, once indistinguishable from pocket change, sold for $32,500 to a private buyer whose identity remains unknown. And yet, the story didn't end there. Interest in the 1981 quarter surged. Prices for similar errors, those with even partial anomalies, rose. A market once indifferent to the year now brimmed with attention and speculation. Martin kept the auction stub framed in his study. He never collected with the same fervor again, not because he lost interest, but because he'd lived through something few collectors ever experience: the transformation of a mundane object into a touchstone of mystery and history. The 1981 quarter, once just another sliver of commerce, had unveiled a forgotten chapter of Mint operations, become a beacon for seekers of the rare and unexplained, and proven that even the smallest deviations can carry the weight of extraordinary stories. In the years that followed, only 3 other examples were found with comparable traits, each lacking a detail that made Martin's original stand alone. As prices climbed and attention waned, the 1981-era quarter settled into the folklore of numismatics, not merely as a rare specimen, but as a reminder that the most remarkable stories often begin unnoticed, in a jingle of change, a glint under dim kitchen light, or the instinct of a quiet man who knew how to pay attention. In the spring of 1986, amid the steady hum of American commerce and the quiet clinking of change in jacket pockets, the United States Mint continued its relentless task of supplying coins for a growing nation. The quarter-dollar coin, by now a staple of vending machines and daily transactions, bore the familiar image of George Washington on its obverse and the stalwart eagle on its reverse. These coins, struck in copper-nickel-clad composition, followed the design lineage that had held since the early 1930s. To most, the 1986 quarters were just more of the same, routine, dependable, unworthy of second thought. But as with so many stories in numismatics, uniformity masks the rare deviations that history forgets to file. At the Denver Mint, where thousands of coins were produced each minute, a minor yet fateful oversight occurred. It wasn't announced or even immediately recognized. There were no red flags, no dramatic halts in production. But in the blending of dies, planchets, and timing, just the right mix of anomaly and inattention, something unusual slipped through. A few quarters among the multitude bore characteristics that defied standard classifications. At the time, no one noticed. They were bagged, rolled, and shipped across the country like all the others. But one such coin found its way into the hands of a Virginia collector named Elise Carrington. Nearly 20 years later, Elise wasn't a professional dealer. She was a weekend enthusiast, the kind who scoured flea markets and estate sales looking for overlooked treasures. Her fascination had always been with circulation coins, those that had lived a life in people's pockets. She believed every scratch had a story, every dent a journey. On an overcast Saturday morning at a rural yard sale, she purchased a mason jar of mixed coins for $5. Most were what you'd expect: dimes, nickels, a few wheat cents, and tarnished quarters from the 70s and 80s. But one, a 1986 quarter, stood out not for its luster, but for its awkward appearance. Its rim was oddly thick on one side, the word "Liberty" seemed slightly stretched, and the date, though legible, appeared distorted, like it had been tugged downward. Elise rotated it under the sunlight. The reverse seemed weakly struck. The eagle's feathers lacked their usual detail, and the mint mark D seemed faint, almost like a ghost of itself. It was enough to spark her curiosity, and when she returned home, she placed it under a loupe and began comparing it to other quarters from the same year. The differences were subtle, but persistent. She contacted a local coin club, and the responses were immediate and uncertain. Some suggested it was a common misstrike, others suspected it was a die cap or a partial brockage. One member even proposed it might have been struck on an improperly prepared planchet. Elise, more intrigued than ever, submitted the coin to a professional grading service. The result only deepened the mystery. The grading notes pointed to a compound error. Not only had the coin been struck off-center by a small margin, but it also bore indications of a die rotation and potential double strike. Additionally, spectrographic analysis revealed traces of alloy variance, an anomaly suggesting the planchet used may not have matched the standard clad composition precisely. While it remained officially classified as a multi-error quarter, the individual elements told a story of overlapping mistakes occurring during a brief window at the Denver Mint in 1986. News of Elise's coin spread through the numismatic community with measured excitement. This wasn't a dramatic minting mishap like a mule error or a missing clad layer specimen, but a confluence of smaller quirks that, combined, formed something genuinely rare. It became known among collectors as the layered clash quarter, a nod to the unusual blending of errors that marked its surface. Coin blogs began speculating about its origins, with some positing that a malfunctioning press may have slipped out of calibration just long enough to produce a short string of flawed strikes. Fueling the mystery further was the discovery of a second coin, found in Colorado, with a similar, but not identical, set of flaws. Its date was crisper, but its rim distortion matched Elise's specimen, and it too bore faint die clash marks across Washington's neck and jawline. Unlike Elise's, however, this one showed no signs of alloy inconsistency, suggesting that her find remained the more unique of the two. Collectors began revisiting their own 1986 quarters, hoping to find similar examples. Error specialists debated the classification. Some insisted it was an improperly seated planchet that caused the uneven pressure distribution during striking. Others argued the rotation and weakness on the reverse pointed to die deterioration. Still, none could refute the fact that the layering of these imperfections elevated the coin from curiosity to prized anomaly. The evolution of its value began cautiously. Initial appraisals ranged between $6,000 and $10,000, mostly from small-time collectors eager to acquire a new error type. Elise held onto the coin, not out of greed, but because the story kept evolving. She traveled to 2 coin expos where the quarter became an unexpected centerpiece. She watched as dealers debated over its classification, she listened to strangers tell her how lucky she was, and she quietly collected their reactions, as if each one added another layer to the coin story. Over time, as awareness grew and no other exact matches surfaced, the quarter's rarity solidified. Offers climbed. A West Coast dealer offered $7,000, followed by a Florida-based private collector who proposed $11,000. Elise declined both. She had grown protective of the coin, viewing it not just as a valuable object, but as a symbol of curiosity rewarded. Even when a televised auction house reached out, she remained hesitant. Then came the surprising twist. A retired Denver Mint technician, now in his 80s, contacted a numismatic journalist after reading an article about the coin. He recounted a moment in 1986 when one of the planchet feeding machines malfunctioned, introducing improperly prepared blanks into the coining press. According to his memory, the issue was logged and corrected within the same shift, but not before a few dozen coins had been struck and removed with the rest of the batch. No specific records remained. No formal error report was issued. But his account matched the conditions evident in Elise's quarter almost perfectly. This revelation breathed new life into the coin's reputation. What was once a debated oddity had a plausible origin. Elise's quarter became the closest physical confirmation of a mishap buried by time and bureaucracy. With this added legitimacy, interest exploded. Collectors who had previously been skeptical now turned serious. Discussions appeared in industry publications. Podcasts featured Elise's story, chronicling her journey from a jar of forgotten coins to the centerpiece of numismatic intrigue. The final turning point came in early spring, when Elise decided it was time to part with the coin. After nearly 4 years, she'd grown ready to let its next chapter unfold with someone else. The coin went to auction through a prominent house specializing in rare errors. The bidding was intense and international. The hammer fell at $96,000, the buyer a private collector from the Northeast who'd been tracking the coin story from the beginning. Since then, other 1986 quarters with minor anomalies have surfaced, each scrutinized against Elise's original. None match it entirely. A few bear similar rim distortions, one shows faint clash marks, another exhibits slightly off metal coloring. But no other known specimen carries all the markers that hers did. It remains the gold standard, the reference against which all 1986 quarter errors are measured. Today, the 1986 layered clash quarter holds a unique place in the annals of modern American coinage. It reminds collectors that even the most routine coins can harbor extraordinary secrets. From a mason jar at a yard sale to a velvet-gloved showcase under auction lights, it exemplifies how attention to detail and a willingness to look twice can unearth pieces of history that everyone else overlooked. The value of such a coin, depending on condition, clarity of the error, and provenance, now ranges from $46,000 to as high as $115,000. And yet, for many, the true worth lies not just in the price, but in the improbable journey that revealed it. The year was 1990. A time when the Cold War was fading, the internet was still in its infancy, and in the quiet halls of the United States Mint, machines clattered with the precision of a long-perfected rhythm. Among the millions of coins struck that year, the quarter dollar, featuring George Washington's resolute profile, continued to roll off the presses in staggering numbers. It was the same design Americans had grown familiar with for over half a century, reliable and consistent. But deep within the high-speed operations of the Philadelphia Mint, a subtle but significant disruption unfolded. a flaw so small it escaped detection, yet so distinct it would later reshape the story of one unassuming quarter. During the summer production cycle, a routine equipment check was postponed due to volume pressures. The coin presses kept running, die pairs struck relentlessly, and planchets were fed through with mechanical efficiency. But at some point in this rush, the die used for the obverse began to wear, ever so slightly. The misalignment that followed didn't halt production. It didn't even draw attention. But it did begin to leave its mark on a small subset of quarters that would eventually be released into circulation. Decades later, in a quiet suburb outside Milwaukee, a retired machinist named Gerald Whitmore stumbled upon something unusual. Gerald wasn't a professional collector, but his lifelong fascination with mechanics extended naturally to coins. He had always enjoyed identifying die cracks, off-center strikes, and other subtle minting oddities. At a local estate sale, he bought an old metal cash box filled with coins for $10, more out of nostalgia than expectation. He brought it home, sorted the coins into rolls, and was just about to pack them away when he spotted a quarter that looked off. It was a 1990 Philadelphia Mint quarter. The details were odd. The rim was thicker on one edge, the "In God We Trust" inscription looked slightly doubled, and the eagle's wings on the reverse lacked their usual definition. There was something asymmetrical about the strike. He rotated it under a magnifying glass and noticed that the obverse and reverse weren't aligned correctly. When he flipped the coin vertically, the eagle appeared at a sharp angle, about 20 degrees off-axis. It was a rotated die error, and it didn't stop there. The planchet itself had a subtle discoloration. Where the copper core should have been hidden beneath the nickel outer layers, there were hints of reddish undertone peeking through. It wasn't enough to suggest damage or corrosion, it looked baked into the coin structure. He weighed the quarter and found it came in slightly under standard weight. That discrepancy, paired with the coloration and strike issues, hinted at something deeper, the possibility that the coin had been struck on an improperly prepared planchet, or worse, the wrong type entirely. Gerald posted photos of the coin in an online coin forum, sparking immediate debate. Some users dismissed it as post-mint damage or toning. Others were more intrigued. One noted that the doubling was not consistent with machine doubling but had characteristics of a true double die. Another pointed out that the off-center alignment of the reverse and the weak eagle detail were signs of a worn reverse die, possibly used past its intended lifespan. But what truly set this coin apart was the metal composition concern. An experienced error coin dealer from Nevada requested high-resolution images and later asked to see the coin in person. After a close inspection and XRF analysis, it was confirmed, the coin displayed signs of being struck on a transitional planchet. While not definitive, it was highly suggestive. The nickel layer appeared thinner than standard, exposing more of the copper core, which could explain both the coloration and weight irregularities. Combined with the rotated die strike and possible obverse doubling, the coin became a triple error anomaly. Each flaw on its own was collectible. Together, they were nearly unprecedented for a 1990 quarter. Collectors began speculating that during a transitional phase or maintenance error, an older planchet stock, possibly from experimental strikes or foreign coinage, had been misfed into the press. The Mint had no public records of any such test during 1990, but it wouldn't have been the first time anomalies slipped into general circulation without official documentation. Offers began pouring in. A small collector from Michigan offered $3,000 just to add it to his error coin set. Another dealer suggested $7,500 after receiving metallurgical details. But Gerald, now fully aware of the coin's rarity, declined. He contacted a leading third-party grading service, which authenticated the piece as a genuine multi-error strike and slabbed it with detailed annotations: rotated reverse, weak strike reverse, suspected off-metal planchet, and obverse doubling. The coin's notoriety grew quickly. Numismatic blogs picked up the story. Podcasts covering rare U.S. minting errors featured interviews with Gerald. One expert labeled it a cascading flaw quarter, a term used when multiple minting errors align in a single coin's production path. Despite rigorous attempts, no exact matches have since been found. A few 1990 quarters have surfaced with similar reverse weakness or modest die rotations, but none have matched the trifecta of Gerald's discovery. At a high-profile coin show in Chicago, Gerald finally agreed to let the coin go. After 3 intense days of private negotiations, the quarter sold in a closed-door deal to a consortium of collectors who planned to loan it to educational exhibits and museums. Though the exact figure was never officially published, it was later confirmed that the sale exceeded $90,000, setting a record for a 1990 quarter. In the time since, the coin has become a benchmark reference for modern quarter errors. Collectors searching through their own 1990 change have tried to locate similar features. Some found die fatigue, others minor planchet flaws, but none have come close to replicating the totality of what Gerald discovered in that unassuming estate sale box. The coin's legacy continues, not just as a valuable error piece but as a reminder that even in the most routine years, anomalies wait patiently to be noticed. That a regular man with a sharp eye could uncover what the mint missed speaks to the ever-changing relationship between human attention and machine imperfection. And today, should one such coin surface again, with all its flaws, its misalignments, and its unusual tone, the expected value would range between $43,000 and $106,000, depending on certification and condition. But perhaps the real worth lies in the journey it took to bring it into the spotlight, a quiet revolution hiding in plain change. In the year 1996, as America prepared to close out a century filled with technological leaps and cultural shifts, the production lines at the United States Mint remained unchanged in their rhythm. Quarters, as ever, were produced in the millions, each one bearing the stoic profile of George Washington on its obverse and the commanding eagle on the reverse. For many, the 1996 quarter was forgettable, a coin caught in the tail end of a long-running design era, produced just 3 years before the introduction of the revolutionary 50-state quarters program. But amid this seemingly uneventful year of minting, a mistake occurred, small enough to go unnoticed at first, but meaningful enough to leave a lasting mark on numismatic history. At the Philadelphia Mint, where the machines pressed copper-nickel planchets into circulation-ready quarters at a staggering rate, precision was the order of the day. But perfection, though pursued, was never fully guaranteed. Somewhere during the process, a momentary lapse, a slight deviation in die alignment, or perhaps a misfeed from a worn press, a batch of quarters left the facility bearing signs of a subtle but significant error. These coins were never meant to be collectible. They weren't celebrated proofs or commemorative issues. They were everyday money, destined for cash registers and coin jars. And yet, among these, one coin would rise from obscurity and become an object of national fascination. Miles away and several years later, that coin surfaced not in a prestigious auction house or collector's binder, but in the hands of a schoolteacher named Brian Kessler. Brian wasn't a seasoned numismatist. His interest in coins was limited to the occasional glance at unusual pennies or shiny dimes. But one day, while preparing change for his classroom vending machine, he spotted a quarter that seemed oddly misshapen. It was a 1996 issue, but the details looked strange. The outer rim bulged slightly in one quadrant, and the date appeared thicker than usual. What truly caught his eye was the word Liberty, which seemed to ripple ever so faintly, as though distorted beneath glass. Out of idle curiosity, Brian dropped the coin into his desk drawer, where it sat for several weeks before he happened upon it again. This time, he examined it more closely under the light of a desk lamp. The obverse featured George Washington's profile, but the surrounding details, particularly the motto, "In God We Trust," seemed slightly doubled, giving off a shadowed appearance. The reverse, too, appeared off. The eagle's left wing was softly blurred, almost as if struck twice but only partially registered. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Something had gone wrong during this coin's creation. Brian mentioned it to a friend who dabbled in coin collecting, who in turn urged him to seek a professional opinion. He sent the coin to a regional coin show where a veteran appraiser confirmed his suspicions. The quarter exhibited what appeared to be a rotated die strike, a misalignment between the obverse and reverse designs, coupled with indications of machine doubling and planchet irregularity. The edge of the coin also showed signs of partial collar strike, resulting in an unusual rim thickness on one side. What made this particular coin even more intriguing was the trace coloration just beneath the clad surface. Under angled light, a warm bronze hue glinted through, a signal that the planchet may have been improperly plated or possibly an off-metal blank. The combination of these features, die rotation, doubling, strike misalignment, and metallic inconsistency, was rare. Individually, such errors were known. Together, in one coin, they were almost unheard of. Word began to spread within numismatic circles. Collectors started scanning their own 1996 quarters, hoping to spot similar features. A few surfaced with slight die rotations or doubling, but none matched the complexity of Brian's find. Error specialists published articles debating its origins. Was it the result of an exhausted die set left too long in service? A misfed planchet from another denomination run? Or perhaps even a foreign blank mistakenly introduced into the quarter press? The theories varied, but one thing became certain: this coin had no identical counterpart on record. At first, valuation remained cautious. Offers came in for $10,000, then $20,500, from collectors eager to claim a new anomaly. Brian, who by now had become more familiar with the numismatic world, hesitated. He sensed that the market had not yet caught up with the coin's significance. Over the following months, as online coin forums began dissecting high-resolution photos of the quarter, demand increased. The doubling of the motto and date suggested machine error, but the reverse's blurring and the odd metal sheen hinted at something deeper. Some speculated that the coin might have been struck on a foreign planchet, possibly from a discontinued South American denomination with similar diameter but different metal composition. The coin underwent further testing. Under a non-invasive metal analysis, its alloy content revealed slightly higher percentages of zinc than typical 1996 quarters. It wasn't definitive proof of an off-metal strike, but it added weight to the speculation. And with speculation came a surge in offers. One private collector based in New York offered $17,000, stating openly that he believed the coin represented the only known full-spectrum error from that year. Brian declined, watching the story gain traction in national coin publications and even a brief mention in a televised collectibles program. Then came the revelation that reframed the entire discussion. A numismatic archivist researching mint records uncovered a maintenance log from mid-1996, citing a machine breakdown in the Philadelphia facility. During the mishap, a batch of planchets had been rerouted manually to meet a backlog in quarter production. In the notes, there was mention of possible contamination from mixed stock and die rotation noted, resolved during maintenance window. While no coin was specifically referenced, the circumstances aligned eerily with the error characteristics on Brian's quarter. It was, in the eyes of many, confirmation that something unsanctioned had slipped into circulation. Brian, still unsure whether to part with the coin or continue watching its legacy unfold, was eventually approached by an international buyer. The collector, a well-known name in error coin circles, offered to buy the quarter outright and showcase it in a traveling exhibit on North American minting anomalies. The offer was generous, but more than that, it came with a promise that the coin story would not vanish into the vaults of a private hoard. It would remain part of a broader conversation about oversight, imperfection, and the beauty of the unexpected. After much thought, Brian agreed. The sale was finalized through an auction intermediary. The coin sold for $84,000. Since then, it has remained on display intermittently, sometimes in museums, other times at specialty coin conventions. Meanwhile, several partial match 1996 quarters have appeared, one with a rotated die but no doubling, another with faint off-metal toning but clean edges. Still, none have exhibited the full combination of errors present in Brian's original specimen. Collectors now regard the 1996 multiple mischief quarter, as it's sometimes dubbed, as one of the most important modern circulation errors discovered from that decade. It stands as a symbol of how even in a seemingly mundane minting year, anomalies can emerge that rewrite our understanding of quality control, machinery, and the sheer unpredictability of mass production. The current estimated value range of the coin, based on recent auction trends and collector demand, sits comfortably between $40,000 and $102,000, depending on clarity of the error, condition, and certification status. Yet for many in the collecting world, it's not the dollar amount that lingers, it's the realization that history often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone like Brian to look a little closer.